On a quiet Tuesday morning in October, police officers arrived at a modest suburban home in Raleigh, North Carolina. A woman in her early 30s was found dead in the master bedroom. The cause, a fatal combination of sleeping pills and carbon monoxide poisoning. At first glance, it looked like a suicide. The windows were sealed with duct tape, a portable heater had been left running, and a handwritten note rested neatly on the nightstand. It expressed guilt, regret, and a final goodbye. But something didn't add up. The handwriting was too perfect, the phrasing too cold, and the woman's husband, a quiet, meticulous accountant named Jeremy Cole, seemed strangely composed, not distraught, not surprised, just ready. Over the next several weeks, investigators would uncover a complex web of deceit, betrayal, and long-term planning. What started as a routine death investigation quickly spiraled into something far more calculated. Behind the quiet demeanor of Jeremy Cole was a man who had been watching, waiting, and documenting every move. And when the time came, he didn't confront, he didn't scream, he executed. This is the story of a husband who turned numbers into weapons, and revenge into a blueprint, a perfect plan, until it wasn't. Jeremy Cole was the type of man people rarely noticed. At 42 years old, he had spent the last decade working as a senior accountant at a mid-sized financial firm in downtown Raleigh. Reserved, punctual, and precise, Jeremy lived by routine. He wore the same set of tailored suits, ate the same turkey sandwich for lunch, and walked the same path from the parking garage to his office every day. He lived in a quiet cul-de-sac with his wife, Fiona Cole, 34, vibrant, social, and strikingly different from Jeremy. Fiona worked part-time as a yoga instructor and was often seen chatting with neighbors, hosting small get-togethers or posting pictures of her garden and fitness routines on social media. They had no children, but from the outside, their life appeared calm and predictable. But appearances often lie. Their marriage, once warm, had grown distant. Fiona's social life flourished as Jeremy retreated further into silence. Unknown to him at first, but confirmed later, Fiona Cole had started an affair with a local gym manager named Travis Becker. What began as flirtation soon turned into regular encounters and eventually a full-blown secret relationship. Jeremy noticed. He said nothing, but he began to track everything. On the morning of October 17, 2022, Jeremy Cole followed his routine as he always did. He woke up early, showered, brewed his black coffee, and left for work before sunrise. To anyone watching, it was just another day. But behind the scenes, everything had already been set in motion. Fiona Cole, 34, vibrant, social, and strikingly different from Jeremy. Fiona worked part-time as a yoga instructor and was often seen chatting with neighbors, hosting small get-togethers or posting pictures of her garden and fitness routines on social media. Didn't show up for her morning yoga session. Calls from her students went unanswered. By noon, a concerned friend stopped by the house and, after receiving no response at the door, called the police. Officers arrived just before 1:80 p.m. and entered the home through an unlocked side door. Inside, they found Fiona's body in the bedroom. She was lying peacefully on the bed, dressed in sleepwear with no signs of struggle. A faint odor of gas hung in the air. Duct tape had been used to seal the windows and door cracks. A small gas heater had run out of fuel. Next, initial assessments pointed to suicide. The note referenced personal guilt, feelings of shame, and a desire to end it all. Toxicology reports later confirmed high levels of zolpidem, commonly known as Ambien, along with elevated carbon monoxide levels. The working theory was that she had taken the pills, sealed the room, and turned on the heater. Jeremy was contacted at work and returned home immediately. He answered questions calmly and provided access to Fiona's medical history, including a past episode of anxiety from 3 years earlier. He mentioned she had been emotionally unstable in recent months and admitted that they had grown distant. He even suggested the possibility that her guilt over an affair might have pushed her over the edge. Detectives found no signs of forced entry, struggle, or theft. Surveillance footage from nearby homes confirmed that no one had entered or left the property during the relevant time frame, except Jeremy himself, who had left for work at 6:20 a.m. and hadn't returned until officers called him around 1:30 p.m. The scene was too clean, too orchestrated. Still, there was nothing overtly pointing to foul play. Jeremy provided receipts showing he had been at his office during the time of death. His computer login activity, emails, and multiple coworker testimonies all supported his alibi. Everything checked out, but one detail lingered. The note. Handwriting analysts found it suspiciously uniform. Too neat, too structured. When compared to Fiona's previous writings from greeting cards and journals, there were inconsistencies. The slant, the spacing, the pressure, all subtly different. Investigators noted the anomaly, but needed more. Jeremy, meanwhile, had resumed his life, quietly, calmly. What no one knew was that Jeremy had been preparing for this moment for over 6 months. He had started by observing Fiona's routines, her classes, her phone habits, her meetings with Travis. He backed up her texts, photos, and call logs. He installed a keylogger on her laptop. By July, he had compiled a folder of evidence, receipts from hotel bookings, screenshots of flirty messages, even GPS history. But he never confronted her. Instead, he went to work on a plan. Jeremy began studying sedatives, methods of covert poisoning, and the effects of combining drugs with gas exposure. He purchased items slowly: over-the-counter sleeping aids, duct tape, a portable gas heater, and rubber. Gloves, nothing out of the ordinary. All purchased in cash, all stored discreetly in the garage. On the night of October 16th, Jeremy offered Fiona a glass of wine laced with crushed zolpidem. She accepted it without question. Hours later, while she was unconscious, he sealed the bedroom and turned on the gas heater. The room filled with toxic fumes. By the time her body was discovered, the heater had run dry. The note. Jeremy had written it himself, typed, printed, and traced slowly to mimic her handwriting. It was methodical, clean, almost flawless. But even perfect plans leave traces. In the days following Fiona Cole's death, the official narrative leaned toward suicide. The scene supported it. The toxicology matched it. And Jeremy Cole, by all appearances, had a verifiable alibi. But something about the case kept it from closing. Detective Lena Whitman, a 15-year veteran of the Raleigh Police Department, was assigned to oversee the case. Methodical and observant, she wasn't convinced by the surface-level evidence. She'd worked enough cases to know that when things looked too tidy, they usually were. Her first concern was the note. Handwriting analysis confirmed the inconsistencies. While not definitive, the report raised suspicion. A forensic linguist was brought in next. They compared the language and phrasing of the note with Fiona's, past social media posts, emails, and handwritten letters. The tone in the note was off, more formal, more calculated. There was no personal flair, no emotional vulnerability that one would expect from someone contemplating suicide. It read like a statement, not a cry for help. Detective Whitman then turned her attention to Jeremy. His behavior at the scene had been calm. Too calm. His interview responses were rehearsed, his narrative precise. That level of control under pressure wasn't necessarily proof of guilt, but it wasn't typical of a grieving husband either. Next came the digital trail. While Jeremy had an alibi. For the morning of October 17th, his activity in the weeks and months leading up to the incident was anything but ordinary. A digital forensics team examined his home computer. Although nothing alarming appeared at first glance, a deeper scan recovered deleted browser history and hidden folders. What they found began to shift the case. Jeremy had conducted hundreds of searches related to undetectable poisons, gas leaks, sleeping pills, and even how to mimic someone's handwriting. He had bookmarked articles on carbon monoxide deaths and forums discussing ways to stage a suicide. The dates of these searches went back as far as May. More troubling were the spreadsheets. Jeremy had compiled a folder named Accounts 2021. But inside were not financial records, it was surveillance. Detailed logs of Fiona's daily routines, timestamps of when she left and returned, notes about suspicious calls, and names of places she frequently visited. The level of detail was obsessive. Detective Whitman requested Fiona's phone records. The affair Jeremy had hinted at? It was real. Dozens of messages and call logs between Fiona and Travis Becker confirmed the relationship. Photos and hotel reservations backed it up. But Travis was quickly ruled out as a suspect. He had a solid alibi for the time of death and no access to the Cole residence. What stood out was that Jeremy had never confronted his wife about the affair. There were no angry texts, no threats, no emotional outbursts. It was as if he had silently accepted it, or had been biding his time. A forensic team then examined the heater found at the scene. Though it was a common portable model, the gas canister attached to it was traced to a small hardware store 40 miles outside the city. Store records showed the purchase had been made in cash by a man matching Jeremy's description. Surveillance. Footage from that store, time-stamped 2 weeks before Fiona's death, confirmed it. Whitman also dug into the purchase trail for the sleeping pills. Over several months, Jeremy had bought small boxes from multiple drugstores across 3 counties. Never enough to raise suspicion, but enough to build a stockpile. Still, there were challenges. All the evidence was circumstantial. There were no fingerprints on the note, no direct witness, and the timeline of events appeared airtight. Then came the breakthrough. Detective Whitman subpoenaed security footage from Jeremy's workplace parking garage. Though Jeremy had logged into his work computer at 6:50 a.m., the building's entrance camera showed him arriving nearly 30 minutes later than his usual time. He had entered the parking garage, exited his vehicle, then disappeared from view. The building entry logs showed a gap between his garage arrival and his security badge swipe at the main entrance. Curious, Whitman reviewed nearby traffic cams. One picked up a silver sedan, matching Jeremy's, pulling out of the garage at 6:35 a.m. and returning at 6:47 a.m. That meant Jeremy had briefly left the office complex during the window when Fiona was still alive at home. This single inconsistency cracked open the case. Investigators theorized that Jeremy had left his house early, returned briefly from his office to stage the heater and seal the room, and then made it back to work before anyone noticed. He had logged in just in time to maintain his alibi, counting on the assumption that no one would examine the small window between his departure and login. A search warrant was issued for the Cole residence. In the garage, detectives recovered a pair of latex gloves and adhesive residue matching the brand of duct tape used in the bedroom. The heater's instruction manual, wiped clean but intact, was found in a bin under the workbench. In the attic, tucked behind insulation, they discovered the original draft of the suicide note, typed, printed, and annotated with handwritten, practice strokes. It was enough. On November 8th, Jeremy Cole was arrested at his office without incident. He made no statements and requested legal representation immediately. The quiet accountant's mask had slipped, and behind it was a man who had engineered every detail of his wife's death with surgical precision. With Jeremy Cole now in custody, investigators believed they had unraveled the mechanics of a meticulously planned crime. But the case was far from over. What came next would expose deeper layers, elements even the most seasoned detectives hadn't anticipated. While cataloging Jeremy's home office for evidence, officers came across an encrypted external hard drive. Forensics technicians began the process of cracking it. What they uncovered went beyond surveillance. It revealed a hidden archive of calculated revenge. Inside the drive were files dating back nearly 2 years. It was more than just tracking Fiona's movements. Jeremy had compiled an extensive dossier not only on her, but on Travis Becker, Fiona's lover, and 2 other men she had allegedly communicated with over the years. Some files included hotel room receipts, surveillance photos taken from Jeremy's own vehicle, and copied text threads. One folder stood out, labeled Endgame. It contained a series of dated documents with checklists, possible scenarios, failure contingencies, and step-by-step instructions. Titles included Silent Method, If She Finds Out, and Disposal Options, Low Risk. Investigators were stunned, not just by the cold tone of the files but by the level of planning. It was more than just a crime. It was a project. One file, dated 4 months before Fiona's death, outlined an alternate method involving a staged overdose and bathtub drowning. Another detailed a plan to tamper with her vehicle's brake system. The final file, titled October Plan Confirmed, matched the exact steps Jeremy had executed the morning of her death. What disturbed detectives further was a spreadsheet labeled Risk Assessment. It ranked various methods of murder, based on probability of success, risk of detection, and cleanup difficulty. Carbon monoxide paired with sleeping pills had the highest score, and then came the unexpected twist. In a separate folder titled Insurance Recovery, investigators found scanned documents that revealed a recent life insurance policy update, one Fiona was unaware of. Jeremy had forged her signature to increase her policy to $750,000 just 8 weeks before her death. The policy payout listed Jeremy as the sole beneficiary. That led detectives to the financial angle. A forensic accountant was brought in to review Jeremy's personal and business transactions. While his professional life had appeared stable, Jeremy was quietly drowning in debt. Multiple high-risk investments had failed in recent years. Credit card statements showed mounting balances, and his 401k had been cashed out months earlier, had also taken out a private loan under a fake business name, a loan that was due for full repayment in November. The timing was no coincidence. Jeremy hadn't just plotted Fiona's murder out of personal revenge. He had built it into a financial recovery plan. The motive, once believed to be emotional betrayal, now included calculated monetary gain. Detective Whitman shared her findings with the district attorney's office. The case was upgraded from second-degree to first-degree murder with special circumstances, premeditation, and financial motive. The prosecution had the physical evidence, the digital trail, and now a clear monetary incentive. But there was one more revelation to come. A review of Jeremy's cloud storage account uncovered a second encrypted folder, this time filled with audio recordings. Jeremy had secretly recorded conversations in the house for over a year using a hidden voice-activated recorder placed inside a bookshelf speaker. The files, organized by date, captured dozens of private conversations, some between Fiona and her friends, others with Travis. Most weren't directly incriminating, but one, recorded a month before the murder, included Fiona confronting Jeremy about his distant behavior. She asked if something was wrong. Jeremy responded in a flat tone, claiming he was just focused on work. The recording ended with Fiona saying, "You know, sometimes I feel like I'm living with a stranger." Investigators realized she had been right. Perhaps most haunting was a final entry. Jeremy had recorded himself 2 nights before the murder, dictating a dry, factual log. Supplies packed, room prepped, final test complete, timing locked. This is the last log. There was no emotion in his voice, no hesitation, just confirmation that the plan was ready. It was no longer just about betrayal or heartbreak, it was about control, and Jeremy Cole, the quiet man who spent his days balancing books and spreadsheets, had used those same skills to orchestrate a silent execution, with financial gain and personal revenge calculated down to the minute. Jeremy Cole's arrest sent quiet shockwaves through the Raleigh community. Neighbors who once described him as polite and reserved now watched as he was led into the courthouse in handcuffs. The charges were serious: first-degree murder with premeditation, tampering with evidence, forgery, and insurance fraud. The prosecution moved quickly. Assistant District Attorney Carla Jennings led the case, presenting a streamlined timeline that left little room for doubt. In her opening statement, she laid out the methodical nature of the crime, the staged suicide, the doctored insurance policy, and the months of digital preparation. She described Jeremy's actions not as impulsive or emotional, but as deliberate and businesslike. The defense argued a different angle. They claimed there was no direct evidence tying Jeremy to his wife's death. His attorney highlighted the lack of physical fingerprints on the note, the absence of witnesses, and the fact that toxicology simply supported what it looked like: suicide. They leaned heavily on reasonable doubt. But the digital evidence dismantled their narrative. Jurors were shown Jeremy's search history, the encrypted endgame folder, and the disturbing voice recordings. The prosecution didn't have to speculate motive. They had it in spreadsheets. One exhibit, titled "October Plan Confirmed," was read in court in full. Step by step, it matched every detail of Fiona's final morning. Forensic experts testified about the heater's gas canister, the glue traces on the window seals, and the manipulated handwriting in the suicide note. A handwriting analyst demonstrated how Jeremy traced over printed text to simulate Fiona's penmanship. Then came the financial evidence. The jury was presented with the forged insurance document, signed without Fiona's knowledge. The updated policy, processed just weeks before her death, was flagged as both motive and fraud. The prosecutor highlighted that Jeremy never informed the insurance company of Fiona's passing. Instead, he waited quietly, attempting to time the payout without drawing attention. Travis Becker was called to testify. His relationship with Fiona was confirmed, but he was quickly cleared of any involvement. His testimony, however, painted a picture of a woman who was emotionally disconnected from her husband, but never suicidal. Fiona had been planning to leave Jeremy. She had mentioned it to friends. She had even looked into temporary housing options. That, prosecutors argued, was the trigger. The turning point in the trial came when Detective Whitman played the final audio log, the chilling, emotionless recording Jeremy made just 2 days before the murder. The courtroom fell silent as the jury heard Jeremy document the plan as if reviewing a business checklist. Supplies packed, room prepped, final test complete, timing locked. There were no objections, no rebuttal from the defense. Jeremy Cole declined to testify. He remained silent throughout the proceedings, expressionless, his posture fixed. After 8 days of testimony and 3 hours of deliberation, the jury returned a unanimous verdict: guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced Jeremy Cole to life in prison without the possibility of parole. No plea deal was offered. No statements were made on his behalf. In the end, the man who once lived by numbers and order had calculated everything, except the one variable he couldn't control: the investigation. His downfall wasn't due to one mistake. It was the sum of small details, each meticulously arranged, each one leaving behind a trace. And when all the numbers were added up, the equation pointed in only one direction: murder. Jeremy Cole never confessed. Even after conviction, even after the mountain of evidence, he remained silent, unmoved by the trial's outcome, untouched by the ripple of devastation left behind. Fiona Cole was buried quietly in her hometown, far from the home she once shared, with the man who planned her death with surgical precision. Family and friends remembered her as vibrant and full of life, someone whose trust was exploited, whose fate was sealed not in a moment of passion, but through months of cold, quiet calculation. The community of Raleigh was left stunned. No one suspected that beneath Jeremy's quiet routine and calm demeanor was a man orchestrating a plan that turned his home into a crime scene and his marriage into a fatal trap. This case wasn't about rage. It wasn't about emotion. It was about control, a calculated execution disguised as suicide, a perfect plan, almost, but even the most meticulous minds leave traces. Even the cleanest crime scenes hide mistakes. And in the end, it was the details that undid Jeremy Cole. So here's the question. How well do we really know the people closest to us? Could someone live in silence, carry out their routines, and quietly plan the destruction of a life right beside us, and we never see it coming? Maybe the scariest criminals aren't the ones who scream. Maybe they're the ones who never say a word.